Okay, who are you and where are you from?
Hey there, my name is Darron Collins. I'm the president of the College of the Atlantic, and that's where we are right now, on the coast of Maine in the town of Bar Harbor. And College of the Atlantic stretches across 38 acres here in Frenchman Bay, but our farthest point is 25 miles out to sea, the furthest point of land in the Gulf of Maine on an island called Mount Desert Rock. And that's where we are now.
And you have on this island some issues with forestry, with the sea, and with and actually with pollution. I guess there's some cruise ships coming in and car pollution and some issues with the climate.
Yeah, sure. Climate change touches down both on the water and on the land. We're in an interesting part being on an island here, so we're very, very intimately connected to the ocean. And the Gulf of Maine is warming faster than almost any other body of water on the planet. And that makes us particularly perceptive. That makes us particularly susceptible to small changes. So we've got people who rely on the ocean for their very existence. I think lobstering and fishing is some of the biggest things that most people think of when they imagine the coast of Maine. And we're a little bit worried about what climate change is going to do to the population of lobsters. We've seen lobsters leaving Massachusetts coastline and Rhode Island, and we're not sure where they're going to be 10 years from now. So that's one thing we definitely see. In terms of terrestrial life, you know, one of the most interesting and difficult things is the impact of climate change on some of our wonderful trees. And, you know, one of the most important trees for Mount Desert Island and this whole region is the brown ash. And over the past 4 years, we've seen the presence of this terrible beetle, an invasive beetle called the emerald ash borer. And climate change has meant that beetle can survive much more forcefully here and is destroying most of the brown ash trees that we see here in Maine. And unfortunately, brown ash is the most important and sacred tree for the Wabanaki people. And the Wabanaki are the Native Americans who have lived here on the coast of Maine for thousands of years. I think we also see, and Maine, maybe more than any other state in the country, has seen a rise in Lyme disease. Now you might say, what's the relationship between Lyme disease and climate change? But Lyme disease is passed through the deer tick. And again, without having bitter cold winters, ticks are multiplying more quickly. They're also surviving more readily and just increasing the time where they're active. So we've seen a tremendous spike in Lyme disease here in Maine. And anything where you tie a changing climate down to human health, that has really the power to grab people's attention. So I want to shout that from the rooftops. Shout that piece of bad news from the rooftops, because if there's anything that tells the climate change story in Maine, it's the water, the brown ash, and Lyme disease.
And as president of the College of the Atlantic here, you're and as an anthropologist too, a doctor of anthropology, you're concerned with the human interaction with the environment. How's that going these days? I mean, are we doing much to fight climate change or enough? Or
yeah, I have a lot of hope despite all the bad news that we hear. And both students here at COA and students that we collaborate with here in the high school on Mount Desert Island, like, they're taking this head on, and they know that it's not going to be you or me that has to deal with this in 40 or 50 years. Like they're inheriting this planet. So they, despite being stressed about it, they're kind of taking the bull by the horns. And I think College of the Atlantic is a great educational platform for them to be doing that. One of the other things I often think about is the whole climate change question has just ratcheted up, I think, human anxiety more than anything else. We know climate change is happening. It's happening more quickly, and it's happening because of humans and the Industrial Revolution. Those are known things. But climate change has also really ratcheted up the unknown. What is going to happen? Where is it going to be possible to live? Where is it going to be impossible to live? I think all of this ratcheting up of anxiety has had a tremendously negative impact on human beings and young people in particular.
Wow. Yourself, you mentioned the impact on you. You have a history here. How has the island changed since you've been here, and the environment?
Mount Desert Island was burned in 1947. There was a huge fire that cut across 1/3 of our entire acreage, and so I remember very distinctively being here as a student in the 1980s and early 1990s. And even though the fire had happened 40 years ago, you could see the impact on the vegetation. And things have gotten older and more mature in terms of the forest community here. But now what we're going to be seeing is the disappearance and the evolution of the forest community, and we're already starting to see that with hemlock trees, with red pines, and with brown ash trees, like I mentioned before.
But also the weather. I mean, the winters. People talk about the winters not being as harsh as they once were.
We've definitely seen many more mild winters. I wish I could introduce you to a man by the name of Eddie Monet, Diver Ed. He's an alum of the College of the Atlantic. And Diver Ed, for the past 30 or 40 summers, has spent probably 100 days a year on the bottom of Frenchman Bay as a diver and as an educator. And he's just really seen a tremendous transformation about the life on the bottom of Frenchman Bay. The increase of invasive crabs and the decrease of a lot of the other native wildlife here on the bottom of Frenchman Bay. So I haven't seen that personally, but through conversations with Eddie, I've definitely come to know that.
And I guess finally, the big picture. The Atlantic coast in general, we're watching a general rising of the sea, a warming of the sea. We see changing of weather patterns. What do you see in the near future for the Atlantic coast? And is there something that can be done about it on a bigger level, on a governmental level that you're touting?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can notice here we're on a pretty steep a steep shoreline. So down in places like Florida and the Gulf Coast and further south, rising sea levels are the real concern. For here up on the coast of Maine, it is the increase in severity of storms, it's increase of acidification of the water, and it's the rising temperature of the water. We've talked about that a little bit already. Some of that change is inevitable, that no matter what we do, the trajectory of change is going to continue. But I think there's a great opportunity for people to get together all along the Atlantic Ocean and really just document the change that they see. Because I think one of the hardest things around climate change is not being able to perceive that change. And the more we can share stories about how a changing climate has affected individuals and human communities along this amazing coast of our country, the better.
Any final thoughts? That was good for me, but any final thoughts?
Well, that's about it. I think, really it's about not catastrophizing, but taking it real seriously. What's the right balance between acting, but acting thoughtfully and based on real science, and talking to each other. The pandemic has split us apart, and I think now that we're kind of coming at a post-pandemic level, the more interaction we can have as people and as communities, the better.
Well, I can't thank you enough on the 28th of October here in Bar Harbor, Maine. Thank you very much.
You bet. Take care now.